action by the junta to execute the 4 activists. We feel that this is a crime against humanity. I believe the foreign ministers, when we meet in Phnom Penh on the 3rd of August, will look into this.
It is a blatant violation to the right to life, liberty, and security of person.
Joining me now is Ronan Lee, a doctoral prize fellow at Loughborough University. He joins us from London. All right, Ronan, good to talk to you again. One thing that we did see today, after these 4 executions that stunned people across the world, was that there was a protest in Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, with at least a dozen people getting out there holding signs saying, "We're not afraid." Is that pretty much the extent of opposition at this point? Or is that a promising sign that people have had enough and are going to keep trying?
Oh, opposition's widespread throughout Myanmar. I mean, the reason we haven't seen protests on the streets of urban centres like Yangon and Mandalay is that the military simply shoots people when they protest on the street.
Exactly.
What we have seen, though, is we've seen civil disobedience along the lines of silent strikes where entire cities simply do not leave their homes, or the public service doesn't function, or shops close, those sorts of things. We've also got in other parts of the country a very widespread and very active People's Defence Force movement. I mean, these are now people taking up arms. There's some hundreds of these groups throughout Myanmar, and they're taking on the junta militarily, and they're in some instances inflicting reversals on the military. Now, I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing the military reacting as aggressively as they have been towards political prisoners. I mean, there's 15,000 political prisoners within Myanmar, in prisons, within the clutches of the junta. These executions, though, were the first killings of prisoners that the junta has freely admitted to. I mean, they're not the first prisoners to be killed by the junta within prison. They're just the first that the junta's declared publicly that they have executed people. This, I think, is a sign, though, of desperation on the part of the military.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, so now also today we're seeing condemnation, including from Myanmar's neighbours in ASEAN. And it was only weeks ago we saw those same members trying to not exclude Myanmar so much, because, you know, there's always this competing view that isolation doesn't necessarily bring results, but inclusion doesn't necessarily either. Will the condemnation matter at all to the junta?
I think it will, because it may have practical effects on them. I mean, they do crave international legitimacy. That's something that they do crave and that they want. But the problem now, I think, will be that ASEAN has decided that it's probably run out of patience with them. ASEAN's played a somewhat unhelpful role in all of this, because it is, as is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, it's the regional body, and it's the body that the major players at the UN Security Council, the US and others, have deferred to when it comes to responding to domestic events within Myanmar. Now, ASEAN negotiated with the junta last year. There's a 5-point consensus, but it's achieved none of those points. But it's forestalled alternative action from countries like the US. Now, what we saw from Malaysia's Foreign Minister, Saifuddin Abdullah, is that he's clearly run out of patience with the junta. He described the executions as a crime against humanity, and said that they were making a mockery of ASEAN's 5-point consensus. And that, I think, is significant, because that means that if the 5-point consensus cannot work, then ASEAN's role cannot work. And that will require, I think, the UN Security Council, I mean, countries like the US that have been making very strong statements of condemnation, to be further involved in domestic events within Myanmar.
All right, Ronan Lee, always good to talk to you on this issue. Thank you.
My pleasure.